The rain hammered down on the desolate stretch of Highway 17 outside Cedar Falls, California, turning the asphalt into a slick, treacherous mirror. The night was bitter cold, the kind that seeped through clothes and into bones, and the wind howled like a distant siren. Samuel Wyatt's old pickup truck sat crooked on the shoulder, its taillights flickering weakly as if protesting the downpour. The engine had sputtered out miles back, leaving him stranded with no choice but to pull over. He cursed under his breath, his calloused hands fumbling in the toolbox under the open tailgate. In his arms, cradled against his worn jacket, slept his 6-year-old daughter, Leah. Her small chest rose and fell unevenly, her forehead hot with fever. He'd borrowed the truck from an old friend to get her to the hospital. His own beat-up sedan had finally given out last week, but now even this lifeline was failing him. Samuel's mind raced. Leah needed a doctor, needed medicine he couldn't afford without scraping together tips from the garage. At 35, life had worn him down, a widower scraping by on odd jobs, living in a cramped trailer on the edge of town every day, a battle to keep his little girl safe and fed. He adjusted Leah's blanket, whispering, "Hold on, kiddo. Daddy's fixin' it." The rain soaked his shirt, but he barely noticed. All that mattered was getting her help. Blue and red lights pierced the darkness, reflecting off the wet pavement like shattered glass. A patrol car pulled up behind him, its siren giving a short, authoritative whoop. Samuel froze, his heart pounding. He shielded Leah instinctively as the driver's door opened. A female officer stepped out, her uniform crisp despite the storm flashlight beam cutting through the rain like a blade. "Hands where I can see them." Her voice was sharp, commanding, cutting over the downpour. Elena Cruz approached cautiously, one hand on her holster, the other gripping the light. At 28, she was all business, toughened by years on the force, her dark hair pulled back tightly, her eyes scanning for threats. The truck matched the description of a reported stolen vehicle from a nearby lot. "This vehicle was reported stolen. Step away from it now." Samuel turned slowly, keeping Leah close. "Officer, please. This isn't what it looks like. I borrowed it from a friend to get my daughter to the hospital. She's sick, burning up. I didn't know. Save it!" Elena interrupted, her tone unyielding. "Put the child down gently and turn around. Face the vehicle." She reached for her cuffs, the metal clicking ominously. Rain streamed down her face, but she didn't flinch. In her world, excuses were just that, excuses. She'd seen too many sob stories turn into lies. Samuel hesitated, his arms tightening around Leah. "She's just a kid. Please let me... now." Elena stepped closer, grabbing his wrist to twist it behind his back. But as he looked up, pleading, their eyes met. His gaze was weary, etched with quiet desperation, but there was a warmth in it, a flicker of something familiar that made her pause. Her hand froze on the cuff. A memory crashed over her like the rain itself. 3 years ago on this same highway, her cruiser had skidded on black ice, slamming into a guardrail. The impact had knocked her out, and when she came to flames, were licking the engine. Trapped, choking on smoke, she'd felt death closing in. Then strong arms had yanked the door open, pulling her free. A man's voice, calm amid the chaos. "You're going to be okay. Just breathe, in and out." He'd carried her to safety, his jacket singed before vanishing into the night. No name, no badge number. Just gone. Elena's breath caught, those eyes the same steady, selfless gaze. You saved me," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the storm. 3 years ago, on Highway 17. Samuel blinked, recognition dawning slowly. Leah stirred in his arms, letting out a soft whimper as the cold woke her. He shifted her weight, his expression softening. "I remember your voice, but I never thought I'd see you again like this." The morning after the storm broke with a reluctant dawn, casting pale light over Cedar Falls. Elena Cruz sat at her desk in the precinct, the stolen vehicle report open in front of her. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, but instead of filing charges against Samuel Wyatt, she typed a single note: "Further investigation required, no immediate action." She hit save, her heart pounding in a way that had nothing to do with protocol. Last night's encounter replayed in her mind, the rain, the cuffs, those eyes. She couldn't arrest the man who'd pulled her from a burning wreck. Not yet. Not without understanding why he'd vanished back then. Elena leaned back in her chair, rubbing her temples. The precinct buzzed around her officers, chatting about weekend plans, the clatter of keyboards, the faint smell of stale coffee. But her thoughts drifted elsewhere. She grabbed her keys and headed out for patrol, her route conveniently looping past the run-down auto shop on the outskirts of town where Samuel worked. Parking across the street, hidden behind a row of parked cars, she watched. Samuel was already elbow-deep in an engine, his sleeves rolled up, grease streaking his arms. A teenage apprentice stood beside him, shivering in the crisp air, fumbling with a wrench. Samuel paused, noticing the boy's discomfort. Without a word, he shrugged off his own jacket, threadbare, and patched and draped it over the kid's shoulders. "Keep going," he said simply, turning back to the car as if the cold didn't bite into his thin shirt. He worked on his breath visible in the chill, not once complaining or glancing back. Elena felt a pang in her chest, sharp and unfamiliar. It was like a crack forming in the armor she'd built over years on the force. Growing up in the Bronx, she'd learned early that trust was a luxury. Her mother had overdosed when Elena was 12, her father locked up for petty crimes by the time she was 15. The streets had taught her to rely on no one to see the world as a battlefield. Becoming a cop was her way out, her shield. But watching Samuel sacrifice his warmth for a stranger stirred something she'd buried deep, a reminder that not everyone was out for themselves. That evening back in her sparse apartment, Elena pulled out the old file from her accident. The pages were yellowed, the details stark. Unknown rescuer, no identification provided. She stared at the grainy photo from the scene, the charred cruiser. Now she knew. Samuel Wyatt. Flipping through, she found a recent attachment from her initial check, a photo of Leah, his daughter, beaming in a faded pink dress outside their trailer. The girl's eyes sparkled with innocence, a stark contrast to the poverty around her. Why save someone and disappear? Why not claim the hero's spotlight? The questions gnawed at her. Unable to shake it, Elena drove to the auto shop after hours. The lights were still on Samuel, wiping down tools under a flickering bulb. He looked up as she entered, no surprise in his expression, just a quiet nod. "I figured you'd come with paperwork," he said, setting down a rag. "Not yet," Elena replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "I owe you more than that. You saved my life." They sat at a scarred workbench in the back, the air thick with the scent of oil and metal. Samuel brewed tea in mismatched mugs, no coffee. He explained it kept him up thinking about the past. Elena gripped her cup, the warmth seeping into her hands. "Why did you do it?" she asked finally. "Pull me out, then just leave, no name, no nothing." Samuel stared into his tea, his face lined with fatigue. 3 years ago, my wife had just passed. Cancer took her fast. I was out of work, barely keeping a roof over Leah's head. That night on the highway, I saw the crash and I couldn't walk away. Not after losing her, but I didn't stick around because I didn't think I deserved the credit. I was a mess, just a guy trying to do one right thing in a world that felt wrong. I figured you'd forget, and I'd move on. Elena's throat tightened. I didn't forget. I thought the world was full of liars, people who take and never give. After my mom died from drugs and my dad went to prison, I swore I'd never trust anyone again. But your voice, you're going to be okay. Just breathe. It got me through. And now, seeing you here, I have to ask, do you still believe in good after everything? Samuel met her gaze, his eyes steady. I don't have to believe. I choose it. Even if no one sees. It's how I teach Leah to live in this unfair world. One small act at a time. Elena reached into her pocket, pulling out her scorched badge from the accident, a twisted piece of metal she'd kept as a talisman. This survived the fire. Because of you. If you hadn't been there, I wouldn't be here now, trying to be the good I didn't believe in. She placed it in his hand. He accepted it silently, their fingers brushing a spark of connection in the quiet garage. For the first time in years, Elena felt the weight of her walls begin to lift. The whispers started small but spread like wildfire through Cedar Falls. A grainy photo surfaced on the local news site's gossip page, Elena leaving Samuel's garage late at night, her patrol car parked discreetly nearby. The headline screamed, "Local cop and suspected thief. What's the real story?" Comments flooded in speculation about Favors exchanged questions about her integrity. At the precinct, her colleagues shot sidelong glances during briefings. "Cruz, you seeing someone off the books?" one joked. But the edge in his voice wasn't playful. Her captain pulled her aside, brow furrowed. "If there's something I need to know, say it now. We can't have scandals." Elena clenched her jaw, denying it all, but the damage was done. She defended Samuel in her mind, replaying their conversation over tea the way he'd opened up about his wife's death. But doubt crept in. Why hadn't he said more? Why the silence now? She drove to his trailer that evening, the photo crumpled in her hand. The small home sat on the town's fringe, its porch light casting a weak glow. Samuel opened the door, Leah peeking from behind him, clutching a stuffed bear. "You see this?" Elena thrust the paper forward, her voice tight with frustration. "The whole town thinks we're involved. My team's grilling me about dating a guy with a record. I stuck my neck out for you and you—" Samuel took the paper, his face paling, but he didn't react. He folded it neatly and set it aside. "I'm sorry it's causing you trouble." "That's it. Sorry." Elena's eyes flashed. "Your boss called you in too, didn't he? The shop's losing customers because of this. Why aren't you fighting it? Why the silence?" At the auto shop that morning, his employer Walter had cornered him in the break room. "Wyatt, I trusted you when you said it was nothing. But this, customers are asking questions. I can't afford the drama." Samuel had nodded, murmuring, "Understood," and gone back to work. His hands steady on the tools, but his mind churning. Now facing Elena, he looked away, staring at the faded wallpaper. "Because it's easier this way. I've got nothing to offer. When my wife died, I couldn't save her. The treatments were too expensive and I failed. After that, I shut down. Just me and Leah. I don't know how to let people in without ruining things. You'll see it eventually. I'm not worth the hassle and you'll leave. Like everyone else." Elena's breath hitched, tears pricking her eyes. His words mirrored her own buried fears. Flashes of her childhood hit her, the Bronx apartment reeking of neglect, her mother's hollow eyes, before the overdose, her father's handcuffs clicking shut as cops dragged him away. So she'd built walls to survive, vowing never to need anyone. But Samuel's confession cracked something open. "You think I don't get that?" she whispered, her voice breaking. "I see myself in you. I grew up with nothing but broken promises. I swore I'd never trust and never let anyone close enough to hurt me. But you saw my pain that night on the highway. You pulled me out, gave me hope. And now you're leaving me alone with it again." Samuel's shoulders slumped, a single tear tracing down his grease-streaked cheek. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I know how to save people, pull them from wrecks, fix what's broken on the outside. But keeping them, letting them stay, I don't know how. I've lost too much." The air between them thickened with unspoken ache. Elena stepped closer, her hand hovering near his. "I don't need perfect," she said, her voice trembling. "I need someone brave enough to let me stay, even when they feel unworthy." But Samuel didn't reach back. He just stood there silent, his eyes dropping to the floor. The quiet stretched heavy and final. Elena's heart twisted. She turned away, the door creaking as she opened it. Rain had started again, soft patters on the roof. At the threshold, she paused, looking back one last time. "If you think I'm so strong, I don't need anyone," she said, her words barely above a whisper. "Then you never really looked at me." With that, she walked into the night, the door clicking shut behind her, not with anger, but with a pain that echoed in her chest long after. 2 days dragged by in a haze for Samuel, each one heavier than the last. He threw himself into work at the garage, his hands moving mechanically through oil changes and tire rotations, but his mind replayed Elena's parting words like a broken record. The trailer felt emptier, Leah's chatter a distant echo against the silence he'd imposed on himself. On the 3rd day, Leah came home from school with her backpack slung low, her small face serious. She dropped a crumpled drawing on the kitchen table without a word and went to her room. Samuel smoothed out the paper. It was a child's sketch, 3 stick figures holding hands labeled Mom, Me, and Dad. But Mom had been crossed out and replaced with Officer Lady. Below, in wobbly letters, "Daddy, don't let her go." His throat tightened. He hadn't taught her that. Knocking softly on her door, he found Leah sitting on her bed, hugging her knees. "Sweetheart, what's this?" Leah looked up, her eyes wide and earnest. "I saw the police lady crying when she left. You always say to keep people who tell the truth. She called you good daddy. Why did you let her go?" The words hit like a punch. Samuel sank onto the edge of the bed, pulling Leah into his arms. He'd spent years teaching her resilience, kindness in a harsh world, but here she was, mirroring his lessons back at him. I was scared, kiddo, but you're right. Sometimes daddies make mistakes too." That night, he ironed his one good shirt, the faded blue one from better days, and helped Leah into her coat. They walked hand in hand through the cooling evening to the police station, the streetlights buzzing overhead. Samuel's heart raced. He hadn't planned what to say, only that he couldn't let fear win again. They waited on a bench outside, Leah swinging her legs, clutching the drawing like a talisman. Officers came and went, casting curious glances, but Samuel kept his eyes on the door. Finally, it swung open, and Elena emerged, her uniform rumpled from a long shift, a stack of files under her arm. She stopped short, her expression shifting from exhaustion to surprise. Leah jumped up before Samuel could speak, thrusting the paper forward. "I made this for you. Don't cry anymore, okay?" Elena knelt down, taking the drawing with trembling hands. The simple figures blurred through unshed tears as she traced the lines. "It's beautiful," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Thank you, Leah." She glanced up at Samuel, searching his face. "What are you doing here?" Samuel stood, his hands shoved in his pockets to hide their shake. I'm not good at this. Words, letting people in. I've spent years building walls because I thought it'd protect us. But Leah, she reminded me what I've been teaching her all along. If you're still willing to stay, I promise I won't turn away anymore." Elena's breath caught. She rose slowly, folding the drawing carefully and tucking it into her pocket. Leah watched wide-eyed as Elena stepped closer to Samuel, her eyes locking onto his. Tears spilled over tracing paths down her cheeks. Without a word, she pulled Leah into a gentle hug. First the girl's small arms wrapping around her neck. Then straightening, she faced Samuel. "You saved me once," she said softly, her voice thick with emotion. "Pulled me from the fire when I thought it was over. Now it's my turn to hold on to the man who thinks he's not worth saving before the world convinces him he's right." Samuel bowed his head, a sob escaping him. No grand apologies, no dramatic pleas, just the quiet acceptance of forgiveness. He reached out tentatively, and Elena took his hand, their fingers intertwining. Leah beamed up at them, slipping her small palm into the mix. In that moment, under the station's harsh lights, the weight of their pasts felt a little lighter. A week passed in tentative steps forward. Elena requested a transfer to the Community Outreach Division, focusing on road safety programs for kids. No more high-stakes chases. Instead, she visited schools teaching little ones like Leah how to cross streets and spot dangers. It felt right, using her badge not as a shield, but as a bridge. Samuel, bolstered by a small loan from a sympathetic coworker, reopened a tiny repair shop he'd once dreamed of. The sign out front, painted in Leah's uneven scrawl, read, "Wyatt and Daughter Auto Fixed with Kindness." Customers trickled in, drawn by word of mouth, and, for the first time in years, he didn't feel like he was just surviving. They didn't rush into labels or promises. Instead, they built something real: quiet evenings, where Elena joined them for dinner in the trailer, helping Leah with homework while Samuel cooked simple meals. No one needed perfection, just the courage to show up, scars and all. Elena shared stories of her Bronx upbringing over tea, and Samuel opened up about the guilt that lingered after his wife's death. In those moments, they found strength not in hiding their broken pieces, but in piecing them together. As the days turned, Samuel realized the truth Leah had seen so clearly: no one had to be flawless to deserve love. They just needed to be brave enough not to run when someone wanted to stay. The sun rose lazily over Cedar Falls, painting the auto shop in soft golden hues. Samuel Wyatt wiped down a customer's sedan, his movement steady and purposeful, the scent of fresh polish mingling with the morning dew. Leah darted around the lot, her laughter echoing as she adjusted the plastic police hat Elena had given her, an oversized badge pinned crookedly to her shirt. At 6, she wore it like a crown, pretending to direct invisible traffic. Samuel watched her with a quiet smile, the kind that had become more frequent in the weeks since that night at the station. Elena arrived a bit later than usual, pulling up in her civilian car rather than the patrol cruiser. She carried 2 steaming coffees, her hair loose around her shoulders, free from the tight bun of her uniform days. Handing one to Samuel, she leaned against the hood, her presence as natural now as the tools scattered on his workbench. "Anything broken today?" she asked, her tone light, but her eyes searching his. He took a sip, glancing at the engine bay. "Not yet, but if something is, I know a guy who can fix it." He paused, meeting her gaze. "How about hearts?" Elena chuckled softly, but there was depth in it. "Those are mending." She set her cup down, stepping closer. "If I get stubborn again, cold like before, just hold me like you did that night in the fire. No words. Just hold on." Samuel nodded, his hand finding hers. "I don't know how to love someone who's always been strong, but I know how to love someone who's fallen and gotten back up. That's you. That's us." The afternoon unfolded simply the way their days had begun to. After closing the shop early, the 3 of them gathered on the trailer's small porch. Leah insisted on ice cream, and they obliged, cones melting in the warm air as sticky fingers passed stories back and forth. Samuel recounted a silly tale from his mechanic days, Leah chimed in with her school adventures, and Elena shared a quiet memory from the Bronx, a rare glimpse without the walls. No one dwelled on the past's shadows. Instead, they wove around them, acknowledging silently that those scars had led them here. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the yard, Elena leaned against Samuel, Leah nestled between them. The world felt complete in its imperfection, a family not born of blood or fate, but chosen through quiet acts of staying. Wounds healed not in isolation, but beside someone unafraid to see them fully. Love didn't erupt like fireworks. It grew from lingering glances, shared silences, and hands that refused to let go even after mistakes. In the end, loving someone who'd once caused pain wasn't about forgetting. It was about being strong enough to forgive, to see the version of them worth holding on to.